We are extremely honored that you accepted our interview request. Thank you very much. There are many ways in which a young person can develop an interest in science. Often it takes a very unexpected influence to awaken a curiosity in a person. How did you become interested in biology?
Purely by accident. There were no teachers, no scientists, no physicians in my family. My father was an engineer. We had moved to California when I was very young, and when I was maybe 12 years old, I had a toy microscope as a gift for perhaps a birthday. And I remember going to a local riverbed near my home and collecting a jar of dirty water with scum, pond scum on the top. And I came back to my room and I put a drop of this pond scum on the glass slide and I squinted into the plastic lens of this little microscope and I saw these creatures swimming around. I mean, it was just unbelievable that you can't see these with your naked eye, but there's life as complex at that level as what you can see visibly. And I just spent hours in my bedroom looking at these things and trying to figure them out. And then, so that was my interest. And one evening at dinner, I was telling my parents about my exciting things, and that my father just couldn't believe it. He thought I was making it up. So I became very upset with his comments, and I decided I was going to save my earnings from various chores, babysitting, mowing lawns, delivering newspapers, to save $100, which was a lot of money in 1962. And so I would save my earnings, and I put it in an envelope in the closet in my bedroom, but I could never quite get to the $100 that I needed because my mother was borrowing the money to, buy groceries for the family or something. So one Saturday morning, I was so upset. I finished mowing a neighbor's lawn, and I rode my bicycle to the police station. And I told the duty officer that I was running away from home because my mother was stealing my money, and I couldn't get my microscope. So they called my father in, and he had to talk to the captain of the police office. And that afternoon, we drove to a secondhand store where I got my $100, and I paid for a Bausch & Lomb student professional microscope, which became my pride and joy throughout high school. Every year I did a science fair project, usually on microorganisms, and that really nurtured my interests. Even though I was completely naive, I was interested. So I went to university, the microscope got put away, but many years later, my parents had saved the microscope, and they sent it up to my family in my home near Berkeley, where I teach. And neither of my children showed any interest in science. But when I won the Nobel Prize several weeks later, I got an invitation from the Nobel Museum. Every laureate gets an invitation to send in some instrument or something that reflects their discovery. And so I didn't have such a thing for my discovery, but I had that microscope. So I sent it to Stockholm, and it's now on display in the Nobel Museum, together with a caption in English and in Swedish that says how I had to run away from home to begin my career in science.
It's an amazing beginning of your story. At the Hungarian National Academy of Scientists, Education and Translational Medicine Foundation, we believe that it is not enough to discover something, but it must be used for the benefit of society. Two important principles for us are science to society and discovery to delivery. How do you think scientific research can be effectively put at the service of society?
Well, the first thing, I slightly disagree with this. The first thing is it's important to focus on the discovery first and to not necessarily do a discovery based on how it might be applied. And in my case, and in many cases, the discovery comes simply out of curiosity for how things work, how nature works. And if you make a fundamental discovery about how nature works, there will be some practical application, but you can't predict what that will be. So in my own early career, I worked on how protein molecules become packaged for export from cells, a fundamental process that all cells use, human cells, animals, microorganisms. And so we decided to study this in baker's yeast, which has tools that allow one to discover this process. So we made these discoveries. They were very important, not just for yeast, but what we discovered also applied to human cells. And so as a result, completely unpredictably, the biotechnology industry, which had just started in the San Francisco Bay Area, decided that they would use yeast as a platform for the production of large quantities of clinically important proteins, like human recombinant insulin. And so now, many years later, a Danish company called Novo Nordisk manufactures, using yeast, 1/3 of the world's supply of human recombinant insulin. Now, I couldn't have predicted this use. And in fact, I was happy to contribute to the work of this company, but I wasn't going to do that kind of work in my lab. I wanted to discover how this process works. And others, of course, want to harness that for practical applications. That's what should happen. The investment here should be in supporting the fundamental discoveries of basic scientists, and then you will build an infrastructure where entrepreneurial people will be there to take advantage of these discoveries. But you shouldn't demand that a scientist do this him or herself, because that will interfere with the process of basic discovery. So I understand the aspiration, but the policy should favor the scientist to do his or her discovery and then have an infrastructure to exploit that knowledge.
Yes, it's very important. Until now, you have a lot of impressions about the Hungarian National Scientist Education Program. And I would like to know, do you have experience of scientist education in other countries as well? And how does this program compare to those?
Yeah. I visit many countries, I see many things, but what I don't see here or in, Sweden or other countries, what I don't see is where the students, the talented students who are here in this program, they have exposure to laboratory exercises. They have devoted teachers. But what I haven't seen anywhere outside of my experience in the United States is an organized effort for to encourage the students to do independent projects that they put on display for others to see, where there's some kind of competition for talent and where the talent is recognized, not because they do well on exams or they can express themselves clearly, but because they have the instinct to do something independent. And this is, I think, was why I got into science. It was, of course, I love the classes, I love the exercises in the classroom, but to me, the most important thing was to be able to explore and express my own creative instincts. And that's the basis of discovery. So I would urge, and this doesn't cost much money, by the way. You have the infrastructure to do this. These kids are doing exercises in schools that have decent equipment. So they should be given the opportunity to design their own experiment, even as simple and largely, foolish some of the experiments may be. It's the individual instinct that should be nourished.
Yes, it's the most important. And finally, I would like to know if you could go back to the time when you were a young scientist, what kind of advice would you give yourself?
Oh, geez. I had tremendous opportunities at every stage. I think the only point in my life where I felt I could have used some wisdom was when I started graduate school. I was arrogant and insecure, and I should have had someone to tell me to, calm down and be humble, because you have to be, when you're faced with trying to make discoveries, you have to be humble about it, because no one can possibly predict the outcome, and often you do something and it turns out it's wrong. And you have to be willing to see that there are mistakes that you make and accept them and admit them, and to not be arrogant about it. And I think as a result of that insecurity and arrogance, I kind of isolated myself as a beginning graduate student, and that socially that hurt me. And I've matured over the years, and that's not a problem anymore. But it did get in the way when I was early in my career.
It's a good advice. Thank you for your valuable time.
Thank you.